Today I will show you a comedy, drama, romance film from 2004 titled 50FIRST Dates. Several different women gossip separately with their groups of friends about a man named Henry that they met on their vacation to Hawaii and talk about the incredible week they each had with him. They tell their friends the excuses he gave them for why he wouldn't be able to stay in touch after they leave, and he has told every woman something different. Henry is at a dock with a woman as she's about to leave for her trip back home from her vacation. He tells her that the reason he won't be able to keep in touch is that he's a secret agent and it's for her own protection that they never see each other again. He makes a dramatic exit, pretending to be called on a mission and jumping onto the back of a moving, already occupied jet ski. He pays the guy driving to go along with it. Henry goes back to the aquarium where he works to give his friend, Ula, some stitches after he got bitten by a shark. Ula's kids are all there and record the operation, giggling and joking with Henry at their father's expense. Ula asks him how his week with his most recent tourist went. He warns Henry that if he keeps showing all of these women such a wonderful time, eventually one of them is going to decide to stay on the island. His coworker, Alexa, calls him up in a hurry to help take care of a walrus that isn't moving. He goes up to check it out, and discovers it just needs to burp. He puts pressure on its belly until it vomits all over Alexa. Later, Henry works on his boat and takes it out for a little test drive around the island to see if it will be ready for his trip to Alaska soon. But during his trial, several of his sails break. He takes a raft back to shore and decides to wait at a local restaurant while the Coast Guards come to tow his boat. A few tables over, he notices a beautiful woman and watches as she makes an odd structure out of her waffles, resembling a house. The woman and the waitress are on friendly terms and Henry overhears that the woman's name is Lucy. Henry talks with his coworker about Lucy as he gives a walrus an ultrasound. Alexa points out that Henry usually only goes for tourists, not women who already live on the island. She wonders if this is because Henry has issues with intimacy. Alexa muses that maybe one of his previous lovers had betrayed him, and Henry admits that his girlfriend in college cheated on him with one of their professors. The next morning, Henry returns to the restaurant and sees Lucy making another construction site out of the waffles she's ordered. He sees that she's having trouble getting the door to her Waffle House to work, so he helps her out by using a toothpick. Charmed, she asks him to sit with her. They flirt for a while, and she tells him that she likes the way his hands smell like fish, since her father is a fisherman and it reminds her of him. After a few hours of talking, the waitress kicks them out, explaining they have to get the restaurant ready for lunch. In the parking lot she explains that she has to leave because it's her dad's birthday and every year they go pick a pineapple for him. She invites him to have breakfast with her again the next day and he agrees. Later that day, Henry goes golfing with Ula and his children. Ula tells Henry that he was able to get a tourist's phone number for him and that he should take her out on a date. He declines, saying he's into someone else. When it's his turn to swing, Henry overshoots the hole and is forced to scramble his way down a cliff in order to retrieve his ball. Down on the beach, he sees Lucy who kisses him and tells him she wants to spend every day with him. Henry wakes up on the green. Ula tells him that his ball ricocheted off the golf cart and hit him in the head. That night, Henry decides to call the tourist and go on a date with her because of his fear of getting too attached to Lucy. The tourist drinks like crazy and pretends to be drunk so she can sleep with him, but the entire time, Henry can't stop thinking about Lucy. Henry admits to the woman that he isn't who he said he was and that there isn't actually any alcohol in the drinks. He tells her he can't have sex with her because he's interested in someone else. The next morning Henry shows up at the restaurant to have breakfast with Lucy. The waitress tells him she needs to talk to him about Lucy, and Lucy walks in the restaurant and right past him to go sit at her booth. He goes to sit with her but she doesn't recognize him. The waitress pulls him outside to talk. She explains that about a year ago, Lucy and her father were in a car accident and it severely injured Lucy's frontal lobe. She can remember everything up until the day of the accident, but she's unable to retain any new information. Every night when she goes to bed, the slate is pretty much wiped clean and she lives the same day over and over again. She lives with her brother and father and they go to great lengths to make sure every day is the same day for her so she doesn't get confused. After breakfast, Lucy goes home to her brother and father and wishes her father a happy birthday. He suggests that she paints his workshop for him since he painted it white and it seems too plain. She happily obliges. That night they go through their routine of setting out a cake for her father, giving him presents, and watching the same movie before bed. After Lucy goes to sleep, her brother and father set to work repainting the workshop, getting rid of all of the evidence of that night and setting the house up to look exactly like it did the previous morning. Henry confides in Ula, telling him all about Lucy's memory problem. Ula suggests that Lucy might be the perfect girl for him because of her memory loss. If she has to meet him again every day, It could be a great practice for Henry to work on his commitment issues, and if something goes wrong, he could disappear without her ever knowing or getting hurt. The next morning Henry returns to the restaurant and makes a bet with the cook that he can get Lucy to invite him to sit with her again. It doesn't work, and he spends the next several mornings getting rejected by her. One morning he decides to pull out all the stops and makes a huge scene of being upset because he isn't able to read. Concerned, Lucy goes to him and helps him with the menu and invites him to sit with her so she can help teach him how to read. After they've finished eating and say their goodbyes, Lucy calls Henry out saying she knows him not being able to read was just a ploy to get her to talk to him and that she's disappointed he wasted her time because he never even asked for her phone number or to see her again. She drives off, leaving him baffled. That evening Henry goes to Lucy's house to apologize to her and meets her father instead. Her father is auspicious of Henry's intentions with his daughter and he warns Henry to stay away from Lucy. He reluctantly agrees. At work, he talks with Alexa about his confusing situation and asks her for advice. She tells him that there are always ways around rules, and that he should try and be more creative and definitely should not give up on trying to see her if he likes her as much as he does. Knowing her route home from the restaurant, over the next several days Henry employs different schemes to get her to pull over to talk to him, pretending his car had broken down, or that he's being mugged. Eventually the brother and father catch on and meet him out on the road when he's trying to flag down Lucy. They tell him they know what he's up to and say they want to talk at their house later. Henry meets them that afternoon and her father explains that he can tell when Henry has seen Lucy because she only sings on days that they meet. They explain to Henry all the trouble they go through every day to take care of her. The next morning Henry goes to see Lucy at the restaurant and again she rejects him. She goes back outside to her car and sees a police officer writing her a ticket for her expired tags. She freaks out because she thinks her tags are still in date because she doesn't know how much time has passed and goes to look at the local paper to see what day it is. She gets really confused and upset and drives back to her house, demanding an explanation from her father. Her father explains the accident to her and her memory loss and shows her pictures of when she was in the hospital. She wants to go to her doctor to have him explain it better to her, and Henry offers to go along so he can learn more about her condition. Her doctor shows them her brain scans and explains her condition, putting emphasis on the fact that she's never going to recover, that she will think it's the same day for the rest of her life. The doctor shows them around the institute and introduces them to several other patients affected by memory loss. They return home, and before Lucy goes to bed, she tells Henry to talk to her about lilies the next morning at breakfast so he has a better chance of not striking out. Henry goes to leave, but her father invites him inside for a few beers. They discuss Lucy's condition and Henry can't help thinking that there might be a better way to handle the days where she has to learn about her memory loss, and that she seems to be less freaked out about the accident and more upset that her brother and father have been lying to her. As he leaves, he takes Lucy's book of memories with him. The next morning Henry brings Lucy lilies and a videotape, saying they're from a secret admirer. They take the tape back to her house and watch it. It explains all the things that have happened in the past year and explains her accident and eventually how Lucy and Henry met. Lucy is still upset, but it doesn't take her as long to get over it. Henry takes Lucy to the tree where the accident happened and they have a romantic evening. Lucy films Henry as he gives her details about himself for her to remember and she asks him if he loves her and he admits that he does. They go on several dates over the next few days and every time they kiss, Lucy thinks that it's their first kiss. Henry takes her to the aquarium where he works and introduces her to some of the walruses he works with and has them perform some cute tricks for her. He takes her back to his room and then they make love. That evening he performs a song he wrote about her on his ukulele and she loves it. They snuggle in her bed together and right before they fall asleep, Henry asks Lucy to marry him and she says yes. When they wake up the next morning, Lucy has no idea who Henry is and freaks out that there's a stranger in her bed. She attacks him until her father and brother hear what's going on and intervene. They bring in Lucy's doctor to check on the injuries she inflicted on Henry and Lucy overhears Henry talking about his boat trip he's been planning for years to Alaska. He says that he's decided to abandon the trip because he doesn't want to leave Lucy. After Henry arrives at work, Lucy meets him there and tells him that she wants to break up with him. She's horrified that she's completely taken over her father and brother's lives and she doesn't want to do that to Henry too. She says she's kept a nightly journal about all of their dates and details about him and that she plans to destroy it so that after they break up, she won't have any memory of him. Henry protests, but eventually agrees to help her rewrite her journal without him in it. After they've typed up and printed out her new journal, they burn her old one with all of her memories of Henry in it. They kiss one last time and then Henry heads back home. Henry tries his best to move on and spends a lot of time working on his boat to get it ready for the trip again. On bad days he shows up at her house but her dad won't let him in. He sees her while he's at work and she doesn't recognize him. At the dock, Lula and his kids come to tell him goodbye before he leaves on his trip to Alaska. To his surprise, Lucy's father and brother also show up to wish him well. Her father tells him that Lucy had decided to go live at the Memory Institute because she was tired of being a burden to them. He says that she seems very happy there. Before Henry takes off, Lucy's father hands him a gift. After getting out on the water, Henry realizes that the gift is a Beach Boys CD that Lucy loves to listen to. It makes him very upset, but eventually he realizes that this might have been a clue from Lucy's father that she still remembers him. He turns the boat back around and rushes to the institute to see Lucy. Henry barges into the room where Lucy is teaching her art class. He asks her if she remembers him and she says she doesn't, but that she wants to show him something. Lucy takes Henry to her studio, which is covered in paintings of Henry. She says she has dreams about him every night and that she can't get his face out of her head. Henry explains that they used to be lovers and that she broke up with him to try to protect him, but that she made a mistake. They decide to get back together and kiss to make up. Several years down the road, Lucy wakes up in a strange bed with a tape sitting on the table beside her for her to watch. The tape explains the accident and how she and Henry met and that they're married now. At the end of the tape, Henry's voice tells her to put a coat on when she's ready and come up to see him. Lucy goes upstairs and sees that she's on a ship in Alaskan waters. Her father is there fishing off the side of the boat and Henry introduces Lucy to their daughter. Lucy seems confused but also incredibly happy and she holds her little family. The end.